All right, now we're going from offshore electricity substations to green hydrogen production. Whenever you're ready, feel free to kick it.
Yeah, hi, how's it going? I'm Ahan. Really excited to be here today to walk you guys through our Pi challenge. It's a funny story, both me and Mikhail actually come from different deep tech backgrounds. My experience in AI and Mikhail's in neurotech. So we both came in this challenge with no prior knowledge or experience. But looking back, that's what actually made us enjoy it a lot more. We were able to dive headfirst into the energy transition space, learn a variety of new soft skills, and experiment with a bunch of cool new technologies, such as green hydrogen. So ever since the beginning of the challenge, both me and Mikhail were really excited by Shell's commitment to green hydrogen because we saw the potential it had to pioneer the net zero transition. So taking a look at this graph on the left, which is available from Shell's transition strategy, regardless of the best or worst case scenario, the projected demand for green hydrogen in 2050 is still incredibly high. And in order for Shell to become a leader in this space and capitalize on the over $4 billion of projected demand, they need to work on reducing their green hydrogen selling price. And while that's a difficult problem, the best approach we think is to first focus on decreasing the green hydrogen production costs. And so that's what my presentation is going to be focused on today, how we can capture excess heat from the machinery in Shell's refineries, convert that to electricity, and then use that to power the green hydrogen electrolysis. So our solution was developed after doing tons of research and talking to 18 plus experts in the field. So this bar graph on the left represents the current breakdown of the green hydrogen production cost, which equals about €5.25 in Europe. And this bar graph on the right represents the projected cost of our solution using waste heat as an alternative electricity source to offshore wind. So in all of Shell's refineries, there are a lot of big industrial processes and heavy machinery that produce a lot of excess heat. This excess heat, known as waste heat, can be captured and converted to electricity to be used in a wide variety of applications. So the way we got this idea is that Shell is currently utilizing waste heat in one refinery. But if we extrapolate this data to all of Shell refineries globally, this can generate over 19,000 megawatts of free energy. Producing this much energy from the status quo of offshore wind costs almost 1.5 million euros. However, just capturing and converting this electricity directly can drive down costs by 2.5 times to under 560,000 euros. So after we understood about waste heat as a potential market, the next question on our mind was, what is the best way to capture and convert this waste heat? And so the process starts here, where we can capture all the excess heat from the machinery in the oil refinery. Then for step 2, the heat can then be transferred to a closed loop system where it is then used to evaporate water. Then for step 3, the evaporated water can then be used to spin a turbine, generating electricity. And finally, for step 4, the generated electricity can be fed into the PEM electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen. This slide just shows a breakdown of the main parts of the oil refinery pipeline that generate the most waste heat. For example, the crude distillation tower, as well as then how it's transferred from the machinery to heat up water, and how the evaporated water can then be used to spin a turbine to generate electricity, and finally how the electricity can be used to split up water molecules into pure hydrogen and pure oxygen in a process known as electrolysis. So after we developed the solution, the next question on our mind was, where is the low-hanging fruit to implement this? And this takes us back to the Pernis refinery. So the Pernis Residual Heat Initiative was set up a couple years ago for Shell to capture and utilize waste heat at the Pernis refinery to heat up homes in a local neighborhood. So steps 1 and 2 already have an identical existing implementation. On top of that, Shell is also building a 200 megawatt green hydrogen electrolyzer in the same town as the Pernis refinery. In fact, it's less than 30 kilometers away. Therefore, just the implementation of step 3 can produce up to 470,000 kilograms of green hydrogen per day. This equates out to almost $3 million in potential revenue per day. And the reason I say potential revenue is that these calculations were done without taking into account the capacity limit of the electrolyzer, mainly just to show the magnitude of waste heat available at just one refinery. But if we do take into account the accurate 200 megawatt capacity limit, this can produce an accurate revenue model of around 525,000 euros per day. This, coupled with the $98 million upfront cost and 250,000 euro per day production cost, gives us a crazy payback period of 356 days. The status quo of using the waste heat at Pernis to heat up local homes has a payback period of 24.9 years. And the large difference between the payback periods is almost all due to the fact that while you can max out green hydrogen production at the capacity limit, there's a large variability in district heat demand in the Netherlands. What this means is that this is A, limiting potential revenue, and B, increasing emissions, because all the unutilized waste heat, for example, in the warm summer months, is released back out into the atmosphere. So far, all of our analysis has been at the Pernis refinery, but in order to tap into the 19,000 megawatts of free energy from waste heat, we need to scale up to various other Shell refineries as well, starting with Rhineland in Germany. So Rhineland is expanding from a 10 megawatt all the way up to a 100 megawatt green hydrogen electrolyzer, which has already satisfied step 4, which is the biggest cost and logistical barrier of our solution. One thing I want to note also is that this solution can offset up to 44,000 tons of CO2 emissions if Shell chooses to use the green hydrogen produced to make sustainable aviation fuel. The payback period for this is slightly longer than 1 year because while the implementation is pretty similar, there are some additional costs for step 1 and 2, capturing and transferring the waste heat. Similar situation in Hamburg, where they also have a 100 megawatt green hydrogen electrolyzer on top of their existing Shell refinery, and with similar is greater than 1 year payback period due to the additional cost for capturing and transferring the waste heat. Now I want to draw your attention to the almost 600,000 tons of CO2 emissions that can be offsetted if Shell chooses to use the green hydrogen produced to make green steel, which is a predominant industry in Hamburg. And this just goes to show that this is not a one-off solution for Pernis, but rather the solution and the amount of emissions it offsets can increase exponentially depending on the use case of the green hydrogen. So at this point, we'd be happy to answer any of your questions or walk through any of the calculations or assumptions that led us to our final conclusion. Thank you. Where are the teams? Teams? Hello?
Well done, guys.
Oh, back.
Really good presentation.
Amazing.
Questions?
Thank you so much, team. Yes, we do have hands being raised already. Alex, you want to go first?
I like the energy and I like the pitch, and you really love the idea. So that's great. And I think that it's contagious. And I appreciate that you brought a simple slides with big messages. And I think my question will be, this is a very different idea than the previous one.
Mhm.
The previous one is kind of crazy. Nobody's doing it for a reason maybe, but it's kind of, why not? It's looking in the future. Here, what I will maybe ask you is, why not? If this is so incredibly financially no-brainer, and it's kind of so logical, how comes that it's not been done yet? Maybe there is something to at least investigate, at least make sure that you cover your bases so you are credible. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on the topic, but if someone comes telling me that this is so financially attractive, it makes so much sense, yet the experts in the topic are not doing it, kind of a question arises, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I will maybe try to address that. And then the second one is, you cannot call that green hydrogen. You can't, because that hydrogen doesn't come from green electricity. It comes from electricity that results from burning or generating hydrocarbons. I will agree that is a sustainable source or a sustainable way to optimize the emissions that you're generating. But if the objective is to stop refining fuel, then you will not generate that hydrogen in the future. So it's just that you should call it something else. Maybe you should say that we can reduce our scope 1 emissions in the facilities, or our scope 2, by optimizing this. And then my third comment, you probably have done through your research, you have figured out that refineries are huge consumers of hydrogen. That's why in Pernis we are building an electrolyzer, precisely because we need to feed hydrogen to the refinery process. So that will be again the question about, well, if a refinery for decades now have been using hydrogen, they need it and they are buying it from someone else, and nobody have ever thought about producing it with the heat. Why is that? I don't know. Have the answer. I'm not trying to tell you that I know the answer, but certainly it's a question that you should try at least to say that you have cover, you have some ideas to defend the project.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd love to just like address a couple of your comments. So for your first question about why they're not doing it, obviously, yes, it is a difficult question. And our understanding, specifically for Pernis itself, is that it was the lowest friction to use the waste heat for district heating because so Pernis is located in Rotterdam, Netherlands, right? So all the other refineries already have the existing infrastructure where they have the whole district heating network. So it was the lowest friction for Pernis to just say it might make sense to connect to this network and also use our emissions for something better. And then for the point about green hydrogen, it's definitely a valid point. The reason we decided to frame it as green hydrogen was that although it is from an oil refinery, green hydrogen, we understood that there's no additional emissions produced throughout the process. And since this heat was going to be released in the atmosphere anyway, it's not causing any excess emissions by diverting it to hydrogen. And also, one thing we looked at is just like we made up the point that in the future, hopefully, you'd minimize the oil refineries. So we also looked at that. We had one slide in our deck that you could actually use the same waste heat process in the biofuel production plants. So I know in places like Singapore and I think Pernis as well, you guys are building out the biofuel plant because that's obviously more sustainable for the future. So there is a potential to actually use this idea. It'll be slightly altered, obviously, in what parts of the process to capture the waste heat from the biofuels. And then, Mikhail, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so just to add on to the whole biofuel facility that's being built at Pernis, I believe that they're creating an 820,000 ton per year biofuel production factory or refinery. So that's also super helpful. And then I also wanted to share my screen. I'm not sure if I'm able to, but I basically wanted to just divert your attention to just like the overall biofuel production path, and specifically in regards to how at a certain processing. So as Ahan on one of his slides showed the whole refinery process and where exactly 37% of the overall production, the most amount of waste heat is. And the same thing applies for biofuels as well. So they both have various different parallels as well in regards to the whole greenery space as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question.
Great. Thank you, Alex, for the questions, and thanks for answering, team. Freddie, your question, feedback?
Yes, I just want to say again, great presentation, well delivered, high energy. You're talking to us in our language, right? These are concepts well articulated in a way that Shell understands. I love the fact that it was a business model as well as a technology innovation story here. You're thinking around how those elements come together. I really like your options analysis. Really good to see that you've thought through what trade-offs could be between those different choices and routes. That was really thorough. Great use of evidence. You've obviously researched this super thoroughly, guys, which is phenomenal, and really high quality analysis. I just thought that was really good. And I really liked the sequencing of scale up that you portrayed in your presentation too. So that was just phenomenal. I think really high quality work there. One kind of question for you and then one piece of feedback. When on the question side, I wondered if you factored into your economics the cost of downtime to actually retrofit the plant and get this set up. If you think how much money a refinery generates as it's running, if we had to turn it off or shut down a key element of its production to set this up, what would the trade-offs there be against your investment case? If it's not in there already, that would be something to factor in. And then I think, what happens to this hydrogen when it's made? What are its routes to market? This is one of the biggest problems that we have, right? Is how do we take that product to market? Who are its customers? What are its distribution channels and routes? If that's not been factored into your analysis too, I think that would be a useful thing to think through too in terms of the total investment case overall. But I just want to say great energy, really well done. I think that was phenomenal work. Really impressed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Freddie. So just to address your first point, so yeah, the cost of downtime is definitely really important. So when we're looking at the Pernis refinery, because the plan is the hydrogen electrolyzer is going to start being built in 2023, and you already are capturing and storing the waste heat, there's not too much downtime, just need to convert the electricity and divert it. But we didn't actually factor that into account for the scale-up locations. So that's definitely something to consider. And similar with the route to market, we framed in a sense of why we chose like sustainable aviation fuel is that's the intended use case of the hydrogen of the electrolyzer that's being built. Like even if we didn't factor into account the waste heat, the current electrolyzer Shell is building, based on our research, that's what they were going to use it for. So we just said if we could produce more hydrogen or produce it for cheaper, but assuming the same end use case that Shell had already decided. I just wanted to thank you so much.
Good comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Akila, you want to add your thoughts?
I wanted to build a bit on what Alex said. And so his points were spot on. One way to think about it in terms of, the definition of green hydrogen and how industry defines that is there's very much an evolution that has to take place, right? So right now the green hydrogen costs, it's really expensive, right? And it's not scalable and cost efficient. So the way you could consider packaging this is that evolution, right? So until you get to the right technologies that make green hydrogen a viable solution, you do have to use these interim steps. So, there's the blue hydrogen aspect from natural gas. So if you're pitching this and you've got somebody sitting with a pile of cash in front of you, you could pitch it that way, because most of society thinks there's a switch we can flip and just go green, all renewable. And you can't do that from a technology perspective or to meet the demand of society. So really very much presenting it and packaging it in that way, I think just increases your chances of success. And just well done. I think the only thing I feel bad about listening to these is I must be a horrible mother, because I can't imagine any child that I birthed sitting here and doing what you all are doing. So, fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think definitely understanding about the framing and the way we use the terms is definitely a major point. Thanks so much for picking that.
But really nice job.
Thank you so much, Akila, for your thoughts. Karina?
Yeah, guys, you already know you are superstars, but let me remind you again, the great pitch that you have done, and how you use the visuals to bring us through kind of like that page turn way and keep us engaged, right? And as Freddie said, you used our language, so in the vocabulary that we can follow you. So again, well done, right? I just only have one question out of curiosity, where you spoke about the link back to the heating distribution network in the Netherlands. As you were talking about heat, the only thing that came to my mind is, any links back to the geothermal energy, again, in that whole systems thinking of renewable energy solution space and how this fits in. Just curious if you had any thoughts about that, and if there was some reason why you decided not to bring it into the story just curious.
Mikhail, do you want to answer this one?
Sorry, would you be able to reiterate the question?
So because as I was following you, it seemed like the initial focus was around Pernis and the Netherlands, and with heat and renewable energy sources, etc., where geothermal would typically just come to my mind anyway, right? And just curious on, was there a reason why you decided not to bring the geothermal potential into the scope or framing? Or is that something worth connecting further dots to? And it's fine if you say, no, we just didn't think it was a good idea. I'm just curious if there was anything behind that, because you all seem to have thought about things in a very wide and deep manner, and then, bring the right focus. So I was just curious.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good point with geothermal, because that's where you get heat and the heat concept. The main reason we just chose waste heat is it's essentially free, especially when you look at the Pernis location where it's already captured. It's the lowest friction, and it's like the lowest cost to just reroute that waste heat. So that's why we had a bias towards the free alternative versus like other, because I know geothermal is the potential, but it's definitely something that we can look into for the future. Thank you so much.
Okay, no, thanks for that. And I like the whole focus on waste, because I think in the general energy transition, energy efficiency in the waste space is definitely one of the easiest wins that we need to focus more on. So I really like the angle of this pitch. Thanks.
Thank you so much.